Hey everybody, Vince August here. It is Friday, January 8th. And look, we had a rough week this week in this country, and there's been a lot of back and forth after everything we saw this week. And one of the questions I got was, look, as a comedian, how are you going to treat this new administration? How are you going to treat, everything going on? Stay a little loosey, everybody, my dog. And, one of the things that I said was, look, I think we need to take a different approach with this administration and show them, a little bit more leeway than we gave them. I mean, the other guy was the butt end of a lot of jokes. And maybe this, like, you know what? Let me just give you an example. I'll just jump into an example. Earlier this week, a lot of people missed this because of everything else that happened. Kamala Harris told a story about her childhood that sounded really familiar and similar to a story that, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told. And people were just like, wow, that's the same story. And I'm like, you know what, everyone, calm down, because just because something is relatable and it seems similar. And look, I'll be on, like, I went through something. Let me tell you my story. I'll tell you my story. And maybe it sounds familiar to you. And you could realize that this is something that just happens. So when I first started looking at law schools, I saw a law school out in Southern California, and I went out there, and I'm checking the school out, and I'm like, I don't know if I really fit in here. And I met this girl, blonde hair girl named Sally, and we hit it off. And that night, she was like, "Listen, why don't you come to a party and meet some of the people?" And I was like, "All right." And I go to this party, and oddly enough, she's kind of flirting with me. Her ex-boyfriend shows up, and her and this dude get into it, and I just go to break it up. I'm just like, hey, listen. And he hits me. And I was like, whoa, whoa, what's going on here? I'm just helping out Sally. I don't know what's going on. And I wind up in the middle of this whole thing, and now these guys got beef with me. And it's like my first night there. It's a Thursday. So anyway, so it turns out next night I happen to run into these group of guys. They're at a restaurant, and I see them going into the bathroom, and I'm like, you know what? I feel like I should, something in me said get even with them, and I pulled a prank on them, and I hightail it out of the bathroom, out of the restaurant, and they chased me down. They chased me all the way down to my hotel, and they jumped me. And these guys are beating the hell out of me. And then, luckily for me, the hotel manager comes out and apparently breaks up the fight, throws these guys into the wall, whatever, and carries me up to my room. And I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, what happened? He tells me. And I remember his name was Mr. Lee. He was an Asian guy, little Asian guy. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, nah, look, I saw you were in some trouble, and, this was going on. So I broke it up, this and then I told him the story. He's like, well, maybe we should go talk to those guys and just kind of straighten things out and tell them to leave you alone. And I was like, look, I don't know if it's going to help. So he convinces me into this. And it turns out all of these guys belong to the same gym that they work out at. It was called Diamondback Dojo or Rattlesnake Studio, something. There was a snake in their logo. So we go in there, and it turns out the guy who runs this gym is like a real ass. This guy, and the guy, Mr. Lee's looking at me. He's like, "Listen, this is the problem. There's no bad people. There's just bad teachers." And this guy obviously, told these guys to act this way, and so I'm like, "Well, listen, let's just quash this thing." So this guy, Mr. Lee, talks to the head of this dojo, and as we're walking out, he says, "Listen," he goes, "when are you leaving?" I'm like, "I'm leaving Tuesday morning." He goes, "Well, listen, between now and then, you got to get ready because." Monday night, you're gonna come to a neutral site and you're gonna have to fight all of the guys in this dojo. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I thought you straightened this out. He's like, yeah, listen, don't worry, I'm gonna help you out. Just come by my place over the weekend, and I'll show you some things that'll really help you out. So I go to this guy, Mr. Lee's house, and the next thing I know, he's got me basically just helping him out around the house. He's like, listen, you're gonna pack. I have some old clothes I want you to pack into these bags with me, and just you have to pack them really tight into these bags, and I'm doing that. And then he had this bar he wanted to take down, and he's like, we're gonna take this bar down. You're gonna kick the bar, and I'm like kicking at the bar, and I'm kicking at this bar, knocking this bar down, and he's showing me all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, you're not, you're just helping me. I'm just helping you around your house. And he's like, oh, and finally, the last night, I'm have this weird confidence, like I'm super fit and jacked, and like I found out that just helping this guy around the house like got me in shape somehow. And Sure enough, the next night I go to this neutral site dojo and I start fighting all these guys, and they fight dirty. I mean, the one guy was trying to take out my knee, and I remembered, the last time, last battle with this one guy was the main guy who was, the girl's ex-boyfriend. Mr. Lee told me this thing when we had to fix his window. And there was this thing, he said at the end, he called it a pane technique, P-A-N-E, window pane, and you hold the pane up, and you do this move. And anyway, so I wind up winning, and there was like this mutual respect thing between everybody at the end, and we walked away. Now I don't know if that story seems familiar. Some people may say, well, I can relate to that story. That's a story that sounds familiar to me. Does that mean that I plagiarized that story, that I took it from somebody? No, you have overlap in life stories. Things happen in your life that other people experience, and you're like, oh my God, that sounds a lot like that. But no, it could legitimately be yours. So that's like one. That's one of God knows how many stories that I've been in, and we've all been there. Like a friend of mine, he once signed up for this. He was on an excursion. When you do excursions, and they did this tour, this boat tour, and they wound up like, the boat. I guess they sprung a leak. They must have hit coral in it, and they wound up stuck on this island. And and they were there for like a long time. Like no one could find them, but luckily there was a dude. There was a scientist who helped them. But people have those stories. I remember another time. This my first girlfriend. When we didn't realize we were both in secret services, and we had to take on aliases, and I was Mr. Jones, he was Mrs. Jones, and we wound up having a hit on each other, and it got ugly. And the next thing you know, we were, it kind of strengthened our relationship, and we were fighting the people that put a hit on us, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. But look, the point is, we have a new administration, and we need to treat it with the respect it deserves. So I'm not going to jump in and start making jokes about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I'm not going to do that. You know what? Let's wait and see how this plays out. Let's show them the respect. Because what kind of comedian would just start making jokes about the new administration like that? Trump was one thing. This is another thing. So that's my take, and hopefully you guys, everybody, listen. Have a great Friday. Felt we needed to break the tension. If you haven't done so already, please go to my YouTube page, click subscribe. It costs you nothing. We're trying to build that audience. I promise you by the end of this month, this is going to look different. We're going to have a real looking TV show. So just go to YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube page. I will put the link maybe in the comments below. Everybody, have a great weekend. Thanks.